And so I'm very, very pleased to introduce our speaker today, Heather Keller. Welcome, Heather. Heather is a professor at the Schlegel Research. She's a professor and the Schlegel Research Chair in Nutrition and Aging at the University of Waterloo and the Schlegel UW Research Institute on Aging. She is an internationally recognized expert in geriatric nutrition, assessment, and treatment. Her areas of focus are nutrition risk and malnutrition identification and treatment, improving nutrition care process and implementing screening and other best practices, supporting food intake of diverse groups, including those living with dementia, and improving hospital and residential food and promoting food intake and the mealtime experience.
Great. Thanks very much, Kim. You'll notice that Huntington's wasn't in that list of things that I do because there's very few people, as you know, that have expertise in Huntington's, and dietitians especially. I'm a dietitian by training. But why they asked me to come today is because I actually have expertise in many of the conditions that are associated with Huntington's, like swallowing problems and losing weight over time. And so I had to do a little bit of research myself on Huntington's and what we know about diet and prevention, or delay, I should say, of the condition. But the tips and ideas around managing things, I'm very expert in, because they're very consistent with people that have dementia or people that might have MS or other conditions that have neurological basis, okay? So our learning objectives are to talk about why food intake and nutrition are issues in Huntington's disease, and can nutrition slow progression? What are common nutrition problems that we see in HD? And what are practical strategies and tips for people who are having some challenges? And then giving you some resources that you can look up as you go forward. So this is where I had to do some research about Huntington, because I did not know some of these things. I used to be a dietitian at Parkwood Hospital in London, and it was a veterans hospital. And we actually did have residents with Huntington. So I've had experience in the area for sure, but I didn't know all the bits and pieces around mechanisms. But one of the key things, as you already know, is that mitochondria this is in our cells. It keeps the energy going in all our cells in our body. And the dysfunction of mitochondria is key to Huntington's disease. It's one of the key things we see happening that leads to some of the motor and other changes that we see. The dysfunction results in excess of free radicals. You may not have known this. So in the cells, when the mitochondria are not working the way they should, they make free radicals. And our body has endogenous mechanisms to deal with that, but it also comes from our diet, actually, antioxidants, right? And as we age, our body's ability to suppress free radicals diminishes, okay? So this is why we see cancer more common with age, right? Other things that have potentially an issue with what we call these free radicals in the body, all right? The oxidative stress, we do know, can overwhelm the antioxidant defense, and this is typically seen before the diagnosis. You start to see the antioxidant defense system not working as well as it should. And we do know as a mechanism for the progression of Huntington's that this oxidative stress can actually drive that mutation of the gene, okay? And so it leads to more internuclear inclusion bodies and more toxicity of the protein, okay? So in some ways, there's a thought or hypothesis that perhaps antioxidants in our diet might be able to delay progression. And so again, this is lacking what I call mechanistic evidence. We haven't been able to do the studies to show this actually slows progression, but this is a thought that there's mitochondrial dysfunction and oxidative stress in the body that's happening because of the disease condition. And it leads to all of these symptoms associated with Huntington's. And the hypothesis is potentially there's a role, and again, a hypothesis, this is not proven yet, okay? Hypothesis that there's a role for antioxidant treatment to prevent or delay or slow the progression. Again, hypothesis, okay? So it's not proven yet. What does improve the antioxidant defenses in your body? So I said there's some endogenous, or within your body, you make antioxidant defenses. As we age, we don't do it as well, no matter who we are. We don't make as many antioxidant compounds in our body as we age, but we also get it from our diet. And certainly there's things outside our body that cause oxidative stress too. Pollution, right? Those sorts of things can cause oxidative stress to the body. So what we do know helps the antioxidant defenses in the body is exercise. For some reason, exercising stimulates the antioxidant endogenous system in our body. No alcohol, smoking, and caffeine. Alcohol and smoking specifically will suck up all those wonderful antioxidants in your body and make you use them for that purpose, to get rid of those things because they're not beneficial to the body, okay? High fruit and vegetable intake will actually have lots of antioxidants in them, so they will help defend the body. Low glycemic foods. This is foods that jump your sugar really high, okay? Pop, juices, those sorts of things, candy. A Mediterranean diet, which we'll spend quite a bit of time talking about, is known to also support our antioxidant defenses in the body. Again, no matter what condition, it might be cancer, might be heart disease, might be dementia, or Huntington's, all of them can have this oxidative basis to them, it seems. Mediterranean diet can be beneficial. Weight in the ideal range, not underweight or overweight. So when we have too much weight on the body, it can actually lead to more free radicals in the body. CQ10, which is, some people call it a vitamin. It's not actually a vitamin because it's not required by our bodies because we make it, okay? But people take it as a supplement often. It's an antioxidant again, okay? It's not a required nutrient. Vitamins are required nutrients, all right? CQ10 is not required because we make it already, but you might not make enough, especially as you get older again, and perhaps with Huntington's disease. EPA is one of the omega-3 fatty acids, and it also has antioxidant properties to the body. And then not having too much iron. So people that might be taking iron as a supplement, for example, it actually causes oxidative species in the body. And it's not a good thing to have too much iron in your body, okay? So let's talk a little bit about diet and progression of HD. We do not know very much, for sure. There's very, very few studies, okay? So this is all rather hypothetical. There's only one study that's shown improvement with a Mediterranean diet, okay? So we usually need more evidence than a few studies to show that something's working. But what we think is going on, what things might slow progression, okay? Once you have the gene, obviously you can't change that, right? But what can slow the progression? Sufficient calories and having a modified textured diet if needed. So we'll talk quite a bit about that at the end. People often have swallowing problems with Huntington's chorea. And this means then they have to maybe modify their foods or fluids so they don't cough and choke when they're eating. Foods that are high in uric acid, you might think, wait a minute, uric acid actually causes gout. True, but actually uric acid is beneficial for a key component of the mechanism to clear the Huntington's protein. So you want foods that are actually higher in uric acid. That actually things like seafood and meat. Foods that are high in monounsaturated fatty acids and polyunsaturated fatty acids, like olive oil, canola oil, those types of oils, okay? Cereals, legumes, nuts, eggs, fish. What you don't see here is potato chips, chocolate, things we like to eat, right? So that whole diet thing, right? Fruit and vegetables and a mix of amino acids. So getting a full complement of amino acids. This is one of the reasons why we don't recommend a vegan diet for people that are Huntington's chorea. They might not get enough of the right amino acids in the right combinations. What could hasten? Again, could, all right? We don't have solid proof on this, but dairy products for some reason might be associated with progression, as well as caffeine when it's more than 2 cups a day. Okay, not decaffeinated coffee, caffeine. So it would be pop that has caffeine in it as well, tea, chocolate has caffeine, of course, and coffee. So what about antioxidant supplements? What do we know about them? Again, specific to Huntington's disease. There's been some randomized controlled trials of looking at things like vitamin E, which is an antioxidant as well, CQ10, which I said is an antioxidant, creatine, which some of you may have heard about, or carnitine. Really, there's no consistent findings for any of those yet. And predominantly, the reason is it's very small samples that are often in these studies. And as you know, Huntington's disease is a pretty rare condition in many ways, 10 per, 10,000 people or so. Where there may be some benefits, so if you're not taking a fish oil supplement now, that might be worthwhile if you're living with Huntington's disease. So looking for one that has an EPA of about 2 grams a day, okay? So that could be beneficial. Other things that are under investigation are all these listed here. They're still just at the animal stage of study, so they're really not ready for thinking about it at a human level. So things like elderberries, aloe, curcumin, that sort of thing. They also have antioxidant properties, all of these, okay? So you could certainly include green tea in your diet, doesn't hurt you, but it may not have any benefits with respect to Huntington's disease. Yeah, so green tea has polyphenols and antioxidants, and that's why it's listed here. It also has caffeine, so limit it to 2 cups a day. Yeah, so limit it to 2 cups a day. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So here it was when it's more than 2 cups a day, okay? And that's coffee. So green tea's actually got less caffeine, and if you don't soak it for as long in the water, it's not so bad. But the key is, yeah, it has some beneficial components too. Let's look at the Mediterranean diets. This has been studied for a lot of disease conditions, specifically around the idea of antioxidants to prevent cancer, heart disease, dementia, etc. So there has been a little bit of work around this as well, and I'll show you one specific study a little bit later on, but this is more of an overview of what it can do. So we know there is potential benefit for many neurodegenerative disorders because of this idea of antioxidants and polyphenols. It's a plant-forward diet. It doesn't mean you're without meat. What you're going to focus in on are poultry, fish as the meat sources, a little bit of dairy, but then focusing in on nutrient-dense whole foods, fruits and vegetables, grains, cereals, legumes, beans. They have lots of nutrients first off, which is key, antioxidants and polyphenols, which is really important for protecting the nervous system for all of us, okay? Studies do suggest that the Mediterranean diet in Huntington's could improve quality of life, could also improve motor impairment, and could lower abdominal obesity for folks that might be at the earlier stages and have that component. Ketogenic diet, I'm sure you've all heard of the ketogenic diet here. Wouldn't recommend it, but I'm showing you the evidence, okay? So it's basically having fat to carbohydrate. We have 3 times as much fat as you do carbohydrate diet, or 4 times as much. And you're limiting your carbohydrate to 50 grams or less a day. That's very little carbohydrate. And so you really just get it in the vegetables you're eating. No grain products, no beans, no legumes, that's too much carbohydrate. No milk, because it has too much carbohydrate too. So you have to really just focus in on vegetables to get that carbohydrate and get nutrients as well. The idea is that it stimulates ketone production for fuel for neurons rather than glucose. So our body uses most of the glucose that we actually consume. We use 25% of the body's energy is our brain. And most of the time it's glucose, right? But it can convert to ketones and use that for energy in a starvation mode, okay? And so when you're asleep at night and your body has already used up the energy that was in your stomach and put it into your bloodstream and looked at your glycogen in your liver and used that already, it then starts to use ketones at night as a way to keep your brain working, right? Your gut working, all the organs working, right? So it's a survival mechanism for starvation, actually. What happens when you don't have glucose in the body means you don't need insulin. And so it decreases the insulin secretion. So this is why lots of people like the ketogenic diet, if they're diabetic, for example, or if they're trying to lose body weight, and they tend to have high blood sugars that spike their insulin, right? So it decreases the insulin secretion, which is a good thing for those folks. And it results in a lot of metabolic changes. And this is why I say I would not recommend it for Huntington's, because we don't really know how it's going to affect the mitochondria, which is the big issue that's being seen to be changed in cells because of the mutant Huntington's protein. So you have decreased production of reactive oxygen species, may prevent neural death, and could suppress the HD pathophysiology, but we don't have any evidence around that. So there's been some suggestion, but no evidence at this point. A negative, it alters your gut microbiome considerably. You have very little fiber in your diet, which is a prebiotic, I should say, and that means you don't stimulate the same flora in your gut that's healthy. And it has contradictory findings of benefit in mice that have been genetically bred to have Huntington's disease. So it doesn't seem to have a beneficial effect at that animal level. There was one case study, though, in the literature of someone who did do a ketogenic diet, who was a person with Huntington's who was in their 40s. They were also an insulin-dependent diabetic, so that might have been part of the benefit for them. And they did see improvements in motor function, ADL, and behavior problems, quality of life, as well as the a score that's used for Huntington's disease. Okay, but basically what this person ate was 2 meals a day, no snacks, 60% fat, 30% protein, a little bit of fiber, a little bit of carbohydrate, mainly meat, eggs, nuts, seeds, cream, and oil. And green vegetables get a little bit of carbohydrate in there. So not a lot. So imagine you see people adding oil to their coffee, right? Yeah, no. Anyway. So I wouldn't recommend it at this point in time. I don't think we have the evidence, and there's these significant concerns with it. Okay, so it can lead to dyslipidemia and atherosclerosis. You're eating all this fat, right? Your body isn't going to clear it the same way, so it will lead to cardiovascular disease, we now know. Nausea, vomiting, constipation, diarrhea, those are already problems in persons with Huntington's disease often. Weight loss, which many people, again, with Huntington's disease will experience, so you don't want to progress that. And that's why people do this. They want to lose weight, right? Dehydration, hypoglycemia, hyponatremia, which means too low sodium in the blood, so you get low blood pressure. People feel dizzy. Impaired liver function and micronutrient deficiency. Again, these things can be problems already for persons with Huntington's, so why reason not to do a ketogenic diet, especially when there's no real solid evidence. One thing that people have thought about as well is time-restricted eating. This is where you limit what you eat to a time window, but you eat whatever you want, okay? So you're eating all of your caloric foods within a 6 to 8 hour window. There's been no human Huntington's disease studies at this point in time. So it's all hypothetical what this could do. But for example, time-restricted diet we know does decrease oxidative stress in the body. That one mechanism I was talking about at the beginning. So there is some thoughts it could be beneficial, or BDNF, which is common as well in Alzheimer's disease. I forget, brain degenerative neuroprotective, I can't remember what it means, but it's not good to have that too high in your body, or too low in your body, I should say. Concerns with the timed restricted eating. It's used for weight loss. So again, most people with Huntington's will eventually lose weight, so it's not a benefit to them. So it can exacerbate that weight loss. And people, when you look at studies where they had used the time restricted eating who had a normal body weight, they didn't lose weight. So it didn't really necessarily benefit them. It's more people that are overweight. It potentially exacerbates malnutrition, which is a concern that we have. Your gut dysbiosis, again, could potentially occur with this, meaning the microbiome in your gut changes because of it. And potentially these negative effects are on muscle. So muscle loss, we're now seeing with people on GLP-1, that's that Ozempic drug, people are losing muscle and rapidly losing muscle, not regaining the muscle. So it's a negative. So they're still there with a pot belly potentially and no muscle in their legs, right? So it's not a good thing. And muscle, as we age, gets harder and harder to keep. And so you don't want to do something that's going to remove muscle from your body. And it also has this unknown effect on the malfunctioning mitochondria of your body. Okay, so that's another reason why we should not be thinking about this. It can also be very challenging to adhere to, quite frankly. And it maybe is a potential for people that don't have symptoms, who are early on or are in their 20s or 30s. It might be a potential, but we don't have the evidence to suggest it could benefit. So the gut dysbiosis can happen for a lot of reasons. It can be what you're eating, obviously, but if you were on a lot of antibiotics, you get gut dysbiosis as well, okay? So that would be where your gut flora gets cleaned out, okay, because you're on antibiotics. So this has not been extensively studied in Huntington's disease animal studies very much at this point, but there is some sense there is dysbiosis. And is this because of the constipation or diarrhea that might be experienced, or what people are eating? We don't really know. We do know that the gut barrier, which is when your gut has little villi along it to help absorb the food, they're shorter in people with Huntington's disease, which means automatically they're not going to absorb food as well, which might be why they have some of the GI problems that they have. Gut is one of your immune organs in the body. It actually leads to a lot of your immunity. So you want to have a good gut dysbiosis to help promote your immunity in your body. And so we know that people with Huntington's, again, have more pro-inflammatory cytokines and heightened inflammatory response. So maybe the gut's involved some way. We don't really know. Again, this is all rather hypothetical at this point. We do know there is bidirectional communication between your gut and your brain, all right? In fact, you can have translocation of fungi that are in your gut, the DNA of that fungi, into your brain, okay? There's a big conference around dementia in Toronto this past July, and they were talking about this whole gut axis thing that they're now realizing what's going on in the gut's affecting potentially what's going on in the brain with respect to dementia as well. So you have an inflammatory response happening in the brain, which might then speed up the condition, right? and as well as some other changes that happen. So some things could be neuroprotective, like having branched chain amino acids being produced by the gut. If you don't have the right microbiome, you're not going to make those. So you're not going to have that neuroprotective effect. So they do know that dysbiosis is associated with Huntington's, but that doesn't mean it's causative, okay? Dysbiosis happens for a lot of reasons, a lot of people. And what is a healthy microbiome? Quite frankly, we're still trying to define that because most of us don't eat the way we should. Okay, so that's the reality, including dietitians like myself. All right, I like chocolate too. Of course. So when it comes to your gut, though, two key ways, I should say three, of trying to promote it. So probiotics in your diet can help recolonize the microbiome, okay? So you might have heard about lactobacillus and other forms of probiotics. You can buy in pill form. This is where your raw yogurt comes in. It has naturally lactobacillus in it, or raw milk will also have that in it as well, not homogenized or I should say not treated with heat. Kimchi, we had a kimchi salad today. That's got natural probiotics in there, okay? Sauerkraut, all right? So anything that's naturally fermented has probiotics in it, all right? So enjoy those foods. They're good for your gut no matter what. Sourdough bread, absolutely, absolutely. So have sourdough bread, put some sauerkraut on top of it, and you're good to go. Prebiotics is what feeds your gut microbiome, and this is fiber, basically. So you want to get lots of fruits and vegetables, grains, beans, legumes, have lots of fiber. They feed the good bacteria in your gut, okay? Polyamine foods, you might not have heard of that before. Basically, polyamine is compounds that are in a lot of our food, okay? So the key is having a variety of food in your diet. You're going to have a good microbiome. We know, for example, I do work with older adults in long-term care. Once you move into long-term care, because the food is more limited, their gut microbiome is more unvaried, let's say, okay? And so when you live out in the community, you have much more exposure to dogs and cats and food and whatever it may be, and your microbiome is wider. And that's a good thing. You want a varied microbiome. So we know dietary polyphenols also help the microbiome, like curcumin. It's the part of the spice that's in turmeric, right? Can really help. And it also happens to be an antioxidant too, again, right? So really good to have that in your diet. Mediterranean diet, again, because it's varied food composition, emphasizing high fiber foods, really good for the microbiome. Intermittent fasting, we're not sure if it helps dysbiosis. And fecal microbiota transport does, but not too many people want to go through it. So imagine having someone else's feces put into your body to recolonize your gut microbiome. It's a very wonderful treatment, works absolutely, but we're not doing it for general dysbiosis. We tend to do it for people that have intractable diarrhea because of overgrowth of some bacteria in their gut. All right, so I hope to this point you've got the sense of... So I hope you've got to the sense at this point, the most important thing to probably do is have a varied diet. That's a high quality diet. That's the most important thing. And maybe omega-3 EPA is a good thing to try too. Other things, not so sure about, okay? So let's talk about some of the nutrition issues now that happen with Huntington's. And this is where my expertise comes into play because this is consistent with other conditions like dementia, multiple sclerosis, which I do have expertise in. But we know that people that have Huntington's, depending on the stage that they're at, will have a variety of symptoms that can impact weight loss and malnutrition. So dysphagia is swallowing problems, okay? In fact, many people by the time they're 50 have swallowing problems, but they manage it. And it's called predysphagia. So I have this myself right now. I drink some water, occasionally I'll cough. And that's called predysphagia. But with Huntington's, because of the discoordination of muscles here, you're going to have more of that, okay? We see it as well post-stroke, multiple sclerosis. It's all about discoordination of the muscles or the tongue not working the way it should. Gastrointestinal changes happen with Huntington's, so increased constipation often. Chorea, so the body movements, you expend a lot of energy, okay? That means you're going to need more energy to be able to maintain your body weight. Changes in cognition, Uncoordinated eating, so managing utensils, for example, drinking from a glass without spilling it or choking, that sort of thing. Mood can affect what we eat, and your oral health can obviously affect what you eat. If your teeth hurt or you have poor pain in your mouth, you're not going to eat as much. So these can lead to weight loss and malnutrition. It starts actually about 5 years after diagnosis, is what Brotherton said in 2012. So the problem with weight loss and malnutrition, it can actually speed up the progression of Huntington's. So we want to avoid that weight loss if we can, okay? Any questions about that before we move on? Okay, all right. So dysphagia specifically, as I said, it's a swallowing problem. The akinesia and the rigidity can affect those muscles that are in the oral pharynx, so mouth and pharynx area, okay? The movements can affect your I should have used the words tongue here. Your tongue movements, right, are changed. Lack of coordination to making you a bolus of the food. It can move around in your mouth, and it's really hard to make a form of a bolus that doesn't have, things leaking out. Inadequate chewing and what we call poor oral transit. So getting something from the front of your mouth to the back of your mouth. That takes you thinking about it, quite frankly, right? Repetitive swallows because you feel there's something stuck here, okay? Belching actually is a common side effect of Huntington's, so I didn't realize. Coughing and choking when eating, or drinking. So you might cough occasionally. I cough on my saliva now. It's like, why's that? That's age. I don't like that. And as people might progress with Huntington's, there might be a lack of awareness or lack of fear about this. So they can get into challenges potentially of actually choking, right? And so this is one of the challenges of care partners, is to make sure they're not doing things that are a little bit risky when it comes to eating and drinking. Of note, over 90%, I should say, have at least one symptom of dysphagia if they're living in a nursing home. So when at the later stages of Huntington's, swallowing is a significant problem. So this was a study done by Calkers. They actually talked to family caregivers and healthcare professionals and persons who had Huntington's. They actually measured their swallowing. And they found that 52% of people living with Huntington's fear choking, which is not surprising, right? And so it might affect how much they eat or what they eat. And this increases the more dependent they get. They fear choking, all right? Caregivers also fear this. They don't want to see someone choke. It seems to increase, that fear seems to increase as they require more and more help. This can lead to caregivers being overprotective as well, which is not necessarily always what you want. But the point being here, because people are fearing eating, caregivers might fear them choking, they change what they're offering, can lead to malnutrition again. So you want to be cautious about how you're doing that. And I'll give you an anecdote. One of my colleagues who's a speech path said she went into a home care situation. I don't know what the person's condition was, but they had swallowing problems. And she said to the caregiver, no solid food, when she meant to say no regular solid foods. This poor person was then just given liquids only and became, losing weight, right? Because she didn't use the words, particularly that it should be no regular foods. It should be mashed up or modified in some way to make it easier to chew, okay? So dysphagia does progress with the disease, unfortunately. So the increased severity of Huntington's, you're going to see more dysphagia happening. And in fact, we can predict the level of choking based on the disease dysphagia scale. Artificial feeding, which is where you feed people through a tube through their gut or through the nose, can happen. But regardless, people will still get aspiration pneumonia. So it's important to realize that one of the main reasons that people may pass away from Huntington's is aspiration pneumonia. It's not just due to the food, though. It's actually your saliva in your mouth that you can't control will have bacteria and it goes down into your lungs. And so even when you have a tube feeding, which means you're bypassing that and feeding right into the gut, people will still get aspiration pneumonia because of their mouth bacteria, okay, going into the lungs. Our mouths are actually the dirtiest part of our body in terms of microbiome. Got lots of stuff in there. So artificial feeding is not recommended, actually, in Huntington's chorea. It doesn't really impact weight loss or mortality. It really doesn't benefit the person. It doesn't help to prevent aspiration pneumonia. So it's better to enjoy food and modify it as needed, but the artificial nutrition doesn't seem to benefit folks. And just to show you the aspiration risk that can happen by stage of dementia. So people that are in early stage, again, the same authors, or sorry, different group here. No penetration means it swallows, it goes right down into your esophagus. That's a good thing. That's where we all want to be. Penetration is when it gets to the upper vocal cords, but doesn't go into the lungs, okay? Aspiration when it gets past the vocal cords and goes into the lungs, and that's what we want to prevent. But the coughing we often experience, or choking on our saliva, that's just penetration. It's just getting to the vocal cords and we go, oh, and we choke and we cough, right? That clears it, and that's a positive. That's actually a good thing to cough, to clear that from your vocal cords. The issue is when it gets past that and goes to aspiration, and that's when we have a problem, because it could lead to aspiration pneumonia. And silent aspiration is there's no indication it's happening. You don't cough, you don't choke, you don't know it's happening. So the dark one is the one we want to really avoid. You can see that as you progress with Huntington's, you're more likely to have silent aspiration, okay? Not even know it's happening. And so the key here is to actually make sure your mouth is always clean. This is why oral hygiene is super important. Brush your teeth multiple times a day to get rid of the extra bacteria in your mouth that can go into your lungs. All right. All right. So managing. How do we manage dysphagia? Speech language therapy is the key discipline that addresses swallowing. You can actually strengthen your swallow. So we can do a little exercise right now. If you put your tongue to just behind your teeth, now you have to shut your mouth and try to swallow. That takes work, doesn't it? That's the muscles you're trying to strengthen. So doing that multiple times a day will strengthen those muscles, okay? There's other exercises like that that speech paths will have, depending on what the issue is. But generally, that's a really good one for just overall strengthening of the oral area, is to do that one, okay? So supervision during eating and drinking, because if someone chokes, you want to be able to help them, right? Modified textures, which we'll talk quite a bit about. Focus on eating as well. So not talking while you're eating. Eating is very social, absolutely. But when you talk and you eat, or you lose a concentration, you then could have an opportunity to have a choking episode. So when you're drinking, for example, if you got a glass of water in front of you, hold the water in your mouth before you swallow it. That helps you make a bolus before you actually swallow it. So just slow it down is the key to help not having that choking happening. Because it's the discoordination that's happening with Huntington's that you're trying to coordinate by thinking about it, all right? Cutting food in small pieces, adaptive devices can help with the motor control. So if, for example, people are eating and it's slipping around the plate, you can put things under your plate like a wet cloth, or to keep the plate from moving around. And then a supported eating posture, so eating straight up. This fellow's slouched down, worst way to eat. So you want to sit up. So your esophagus, everything's lined up really well. That's the key, okay? Sorry to pick on you. All right, modified diets. And this long list of things is because I took this off the net, and you have to cite where you get pictures, right? So ignore all this, all right? But modified diets are not pleasant, quite frankly. So this is a typical modified diet. This would be the meat with some gravy on it. Whipped potatoes, not mashed, whipped, so they're really smooth. And then it looks like it might be carrots or squash. The point is, it's hard to know what it is. Yeah, that's the problem. So we get a loss of sensory stimulation. We can't have the crunchy, decreased food enjoyment. We see a lot of this happening, and feelings of exclusion, quite frankly. This is a study that I did on persons who are on pureed food for whatever reason. You can imagine it's not a pleasant experience. Long-term, people do not enjoy it. They recognize they have to be on a pureed diet, but can we actually make it better? And I think we can, quite frankly, make pureed food better. So make sure you have the right texture. So this, again, why you want to have a speech pathologist and dietitian involved to make sure on the right texture and not over-modifying it. If you don't need a pureed diet, it might be a minced diet, a whole lot easier to manage, much more pleasant than a pureed diet. Presentation of sauces, putting things on, like your turkey, if you had it pureed with a cranberry sauce, I bet it'd be lovely.
I wish I'd been here sooner.
Trying to pump up the sensory appeal, so make it look nice, right? And so you can actually buy pureed food now that has been piped into nice shapes. It may not be the exact look of the food. They're actually working in some parts of the world with 3D printing of pureed food, so it actually looks nice. But regardless, the key is you don't want it running over the plate and making it look nice, right? You also want to have it to be nutrient dense. So one of the challenges of the pureed food, we end up adding fluid to it to try to make it blend properly. You dilute the nutrients then, right? So you need to make sure you enhance pureed food. And people often who require pureed food needs more energy as well. So this is just quickly a very nice little study that they had people living in long-term care who had a variety of conditions that required pureed food, not just Huntington's disease, but they gave them the opportunity to be part of making food and touching and smelling. That itself was satisfying, even when they couldn't eat the food, okay? So recognizing that being part of food production might be beneficial. There are lots of normative pureed foods. So when you're eating socially with people, smoothies are a pureed food if they're pureed to the right level. Grits, puddings, custards, well-mashed avocado, these are all pureed level foods. So you can have normal food that's pureed, right? And so as a family living with Huntington's, you might actually have a component of the meal that everybody eats because it actually works for all of you, right? Making them more appealing, again, running out of time, but adding things like spices to garnish it. Fluffing up food if it's with a fork to make it look a little more interesting. Using small dishes to hold it rather than putting it on a plate so it spreads out. Trying new things to promote variety. Have an accompanying sauce that makes sense. So a lot of this work is done in long-term care situations, as you can imagine, because a lot of people, I should say a lot of people who consume pureed food often live in long-term care. And staff mix the food together and they do all sorts of things that are not very pleasant with it. A little attention to making the food look nice and taste nice really can benefit. So some key pureeing tips. Puree moist meats rather than dry meats, for example. Use nutritious fluids to moisten it rather than water. So using things like yogurt or gravy to puree. So you're making a smoothie, don't use water. Use yogurt or milk, right? Although dairy, we want to not have too many of those in the diet. Avoid fibrous, avoid raw vegetables, and moist bread products like muffins can be pureed too. This nutrition guidelines from 2012, sorry, there's a typo there. But basically, their key components are things that I talked about. Energy to support maintenance of body weight or keeping weight in a good range. Lots of fluid, protein, and micronutrient status. That's the key. So what's recommended is about 25 to 35 calories per kilogram, 1.5 grams of protein. Most of us don't get anywhere near that, so you need more protein in your diet. 30 to 35 mils per kilogram of fluid, again, a little bit more fluid to help with constipation, and enough fiber to help with constipation too, okay? So when this sort of a regimen was put into place, we actually found it actually improved people. Yeah. So you can add energy with a variety of things, like adding whole milk, etc., cheese. You can add protein with things like pureed lentils and beans, protein powders, nut butters, silken tofu. Silken tofu is great to work with. You make puddings out of it, all sorts of great things. And then it's right texture as well as nutritious, right? And you can thicken with skim milk powder, which adds protein to foods as well. So when this diet was put into place with respect to Huntington's disease, this is one study that I found, a healthy diet, limiting dairy, because more than 2 servings a day they don't want you to have, and foods that are, again, high in uric acid. This was sort of what they recommended. They said counsel with a dietitian to recommend these foods. They found that people did not lose weight as much. They increased their fat mass, increased their fat-free mass, and they think it slowed progression of the Huntington's. So again, having a diet that's nutrient dense, if you happen to be losing weight, so low BMI less than 18, try to put into place enough calories, an oral nutrition supplement. What I mean by that, things like Ensure, Boost, that sort of thing is an oral nutrition supplement at 400 calories a day to support the nutrition of the person. Modified texture if you need to help make sure food gets into people. Lots of monounsaturated fats and focusing on those nutrient-dense foods. Okay, so it seemed to have benefit in terms of progression, and we think it's because of the weight. Okay, it's not probably the fat mass or the protein mass itself, but the weight helped to delay the progression. And I've got to stop talking. So these are good resources for you again. And by the way, the slides are already with the Huntington Society, so you can get them from them. Okay? So just to wrap up very quickly, we talked a little bit about can nutrition slow progression? Maybe. If it is, it's antioxidants like and omega-3 fatty acids and Mediterranean diet. Common problems, weight loss and dysphagia are very common with Huntington's. And so you want to try to do some things to support the intake of people because we know eating enough and not losing weight is extremely important to Huntington's disease progression. So you might have to modify texture foods and promoting weight. And then I gave you some resources as well for dysphagia. That was a whirlwind, but thank you. All right.